Talk about happiness and success in your career, in your life, in your relationships. But I wanted to start with this slide because I think it's a good place to start. Originally, I thought that it was Leadership Day, and then I learned it was all College Day. But the thing is, I do speak a lot about leadership, and most people get the idea mixed up in their heads. They assume that you need a title to be a leader. And there are people that do have titles, but a title does not necessarily a leader make. I mean, sometimes, yes, they could give you a paycheck or remove it from you, but the leaders, I think this is an excellent description, and also it's one that I want each one of you to pay attention to because it shifts the way in which you see yourself, the influence that you have in the world, and also the sense of agency. John C. Maxwell is probably one of the foremost experts on leadership, and he says this: leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts, and I'm sure you all work with them around here. But leadership is about one life influencing another. Now, obviously, I appreciate all of you coming in here, and I am happy to be an influence today for you to help connect with who you are, with what you love, with how you can get happier in life, and as a result of following what you love, find success along the way rather than the other way around. Okay, so you want to go all the way to the beginning, and we'll start. Now you know what I'm going to talk about. Okay, my name is Maura Sweeney. You probably knew that already. I'm also known as Maura for you on my website, but my mantra is living happy inside out, and there's a reason for that. In 4 words, it pretty much describes my entire life belief system, and what I do today is really a vocation that is working itself into a career. Living happy inside out has everything to do with the way you think on the inside. So depending upon how you think, whatever your thoughts are contemplating, you can actually be the architect of your own happiness in life, and most people don't know that. They think that, well, we'll get into that later. Okay, you could see I'm an author, podcaster, HuffPost contributor, international speaker, soon to leave the country, and I think I have to speak at 5 universities overseas. And most recently, I'm called the Ambassador of Happiness by UNESCO, which we'll get into. If at the end of this session you like anything you've heard and you want more of Maura, go to mauraforyou.com, and there's plenty and more to find me there. Okay, here we are. Improving happiness and success in leadership, career, and life. Now, most people, when they're little, they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or you hear parents say, oh, so-and-so, they're going to be this when they grow up. And you find parents or society, or sometimes you find other people labeling a child, maybe labeling you. Oh, you could never do that. Well, in my case, I put happiness at the forefront of my life, or my life ambition. And I knew at 5 years old that when other kids were saying, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be the president, they wanted to be all these different things, I literally made a choice to grow up to be happy. Now you say, well, what kind of a job is happy? Well, interesting, right? But it was important for me. Okay, next slide, Kelly. Okay, how many in here have heard of Shawn Achor or the Happiness Advantage study that was done out of Harvard University? No one? Interesting. Guess what? I, who write about happiness and made a lifetime of its pursuit, never heard of it until I was invited several months ago to speak at a human resource and leadership conference in Dubrovnik, Croatia. They had heard me, and they knew that my whole mantra was on happiness. They said, we want you to speak about the Happiness Advantage. Somebody said to me, oh, I think that's a thing. So I go on to YouTube, whatever, and I realize Harvard University has had a study on what is it that makes us happy. And they did all this empirical work to conclude a few things. That happiness fuels success, but not necessarily the other way around. How many times have you, if you really just thought, how many times have you considered life and you think, well, if I'm successful, I'll be happy? But the question of success is, well, success according to whom? Maybe the world, but is it really my idea of success? But the interesting thing they found at Harvard is that if you work on your happiness, you will become more successful. So it's actually the inverse. Okay, next. paradigm shifts, and this is one of the 3 outcomes as a result of being here today. First of all, here I kind of waited 5 or 7 minutes to say what I should have said when you walk through the door. If you could right now make a mental note of yourself coming into this room, if you had to put yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I'm not happy, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm nervous, I'm fearful, anything that feels very heavy, as if you're carrying the world on your shoulders, or I want to fight with somebody. And number 10 being the opposite. I feel very light, I feel free, I feel at peace, I feel possibilities, creativity, all that. That's 10. Just give a little mental note to yourself. Where were you at the beginning of this session? And then I'll probably forget to ask you, but at the end of this session, ask yourself again. And the reason why is this: we're going to talk about how your mind operates. And I want you to be kind of cueing into that. So let's talk about the old paradigm. First of all, the commonly held formula for success is broken. It was probably always broken, but nobody ever wanted to admit to it. This is the one that says, pursue success and you'll be happy. Now, I could remember when I was in college many moons ago, there was one young man a couple of years ahead of me who decided, more than anything, he was going to be a lawyer, he was going to get a Mercedes, his wife was never going to work, and he was going to live in the best section of Boston. Now, I was a political science major. He was 2 years ahead of me, and I'm thinking, I don't even want to be a lawyer, but he was set on being an attorney. And that was all he could think about was success. Back then, not many people even had Mercedes-Benzes. And the best section of Boston was very, very pricey. But he had his mind always on success. In fact, in many ways, you'd never see him dressed in anything less than perfect clothes. About 10 years later, he became an attorney, was driving his Mercedes, had a girlfriend who became his wife, who he didn't want to have work. And he would only wear the finest clothes. He came down to visit us in Florida, and all he did was complain about his work. And I said, Ronnie, if you're not happy, why are you doing it? He said, well, I have a high income, I can't leave. And I said, but you're not happy. And I said, how could? And he said to me, you don't understand. Now I'm dating myself here. But he said, I've got a 6-figure income. Well, let me tell you, poor Ronnie, still my friend, Ronnie is still doing the same job that he qualified for in the early 1980s. And he might still have his Mercedes-Benz, and he still has an income. But you want to know something? Not only is Ronnie not happy, he's frustrated. And here, I want to share one little nugget with you. I met Ronnie's family. I had gone away to school, so I was living in the suburbs, nice college. He was a local student that came in. I had no idea that it bothered him that his father owned a gas station. And they weren't in the best part of Boston. They were in Revere, which I didn't even know was not considered the best place. So something that he grew up with was, I'm not good enough, or people don't take me seriously, so I'm going to wear the right clothes, I'm going to have the right degree, I'm going to have the right occupation, drive the right car. He wasn't happy. So do you see how that would be a perfect example of people who do things because maybe the world thinks it's successful, or maybe you've convinced yourself it is, but happiness adds so much more levity to your life. Okay, so there we go. That says everything. Get the degree, the title, look the part, and then you should be successful or happy. Success, according to that old formula, will always keep eluding us because it'll always be, well, I need more money. I need a better title. If I have one Mercedes, well, surely there's got to be a more expensive one or a newer one I could buy. And so what happens is that we end up answering to all of these signs, symbols, messages we've gotten all over the world, but we never check in to say, is this going to make me happy? Is this what's really a part of me? And when we do find those places, the opposite happens. Okay, so we know the old paradigm. Next, the reverse paradigm with the happy face. Now this is so interesting. Surprisingly, when you pursue happiness, and it means in anything. You could go to work today. When you are thinking about what you can do to incorporate your own sense of happiness in it, you can actually perform anything you do up to 50% better. Up to 50% better. So what does that mean in terms of adding levity or lightness or going against the grain of all that heaviness? It does a lot for you. It's almost like an imaginary, or they measured it up at Harvard, but it adds another dimension to everything you do that not only improves your own sense of well-being, but it improves the sense of well-being for everyone else around you. And that very spirit that you carry, or that atmosphere, ends up permeating, and the end result, if more people thought that way, we would have a much better world. Okay, next. All right, these are the benefits I discovered over several decades, not because I was involved with the Harvard study, but because I was always an observer of life, and I also had my own backstory and things that I did, and this is what I found when we pursue happiness. First of all, by pursuing happiness, we identify and unleash our true interests and passions, not necessarily the few that are out there that say, do this, do this, do this, and you'll be happy. But when we find out what really the things are that we're interested in, we draw them up, we exercise them, we're becoming who we really are, and we're exercising who we are, and more that inside person becomes more manifest. But we like that inside person because, gee, we're trying new things, we're exploring new things, we're maybe building new things, creating new things, solving new things. Doesn't matter what the thing is. The important thing is that the thing is important to you. Okay, another thing it does, this is fascinating. By following what you love, what you're curious about, it actually cultivates your creativity, your skills, and your genius. I don't know if any of you have read this, but children, young children, before they get into school, there have been studies done of them. 95% of young children are considered genius in their own category. But if you realize once you get in school, then it becomes you have to do it this way. You know, not everybody learns the same way, and not every measuring tool that we use currently really is out there to define the genius that each one of us has. And that's one of the issues. We only have a few silos, and we use those silos to say, well, you didn't make it, you're not good. But when you pursue your own interest, you're actually cultivating your own genius, or remembering it, or bring it out to the forefront. The other thing it does in the process, it will develop your confidence and your sense of self-worth, because now you're doing what you love, and you don't necessarily have to compete with anyone else because you're creating your own silo or your own expertise. It also keeps you from comparing yourself negatively to others, a common thing. I never realized how frequently people will find reason to criticize someone else, but oftentimes that criticism is self-criticism. You know, we don't measure up, so we have to find something wrong out there. It's kind of backwards. And this one, very important, it enables you to grow in your own skill, wisdom, and your generosity of spirit. Now, to say you develop in skill, because you keep working on something, obviously your skills are going to get better. Wisdom comes oftentimes through difficult times or challenges. Maybe there's something that you never worked on before, and you have to work through some of your old mindsets. Maybe you have to undo some things you didn't think you could do. Maybe you have to work and overcome certain hurdles as you pursue some of these interests. The wisdom is like, wait a minute, I can see what it's like having to go through this process. Then we become the kind of individual that could look at others, and we have a generosity of spirit. We could look at others more kindly. It's the opposite of being critical of others, to say, you know what, I've been on my own journey. It's not always that easy, but I can appreciate where you are, so rather than criticizing you, I'm going to encourage you. We become a lot kinder as a society. Okay, so those are the benefits of pursuing happiness first on your way to success. Now, I tend to be a storyteller. I know I'm not one that says, do it this way because these will work. There's an interesting thing about stories. And one person said this: stories have the ability to take us from one reality to another. When you hear a story, and I was like this even as a child, you're hearing a story, but you're also writing your elements of a story into it. You make various connections. And you're thinking, well, yeah, they're busy talking about that, but I just remembered something very important in my own life. Here's my backstory. When I was a little girl, this is 1963. It is I think it was the weekend before I started kindergarten. And I was at my grandparents' house in Paramus, New Jersey. You could see, very proud, I finally get a chance to go to school. I couldn't wait to go to school, not because so much that I wanted to learn, I wanted to be with friends. So I am very happy. When I was a little girl, I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to make friends, as I just mentioned. I also wanted to travel the world. I could remember vividly back then when airplanes travel was not that popular. I would see an airplane in the sky heading over to Newark Airport, and I would immediately drop down to the grass where I could look up at the clouds and watch the airplane pass. And my thoughts were, oh, who's in that plane? And where are they going? And what kinds of people are there? I wonder what they're like. What are they talking about? What are they dressing like? And I would always think about people like in China or people in Holland with the different shoes. I was a little stereotypical. But I wanted to meet these people. And the third thing, quite interesting, you see the old typewriter? It was an archaic typewriter even back then. That typewriter I was absolutely fascinated by. My grandfather was an attorney, and a powerful one in the New York, New Jersey area. Back then he had his office in his home, so I would go visit my grandparents frequently, and I would sit in the waiting room, and he would be in his office with his clients, but practicing law. Now, I could have been paying attention to that, but instead I was taken up with this typewriter. His legal secretary would be there, and she was if you think about the legal secretary from back then, very, very excellent at what she did. I would watch her put words to paper, and not only do it once, but I also remember that they used to have carbon paper back then. You could get 2 copies, 3 copies, and I would sit beside her. Now picture this, a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and I would ask her all kinds of questions. How do you get those words on there, and what are you doing with them? And in my mind, I thought, oh, the written word, this is like a newspaper. This is it's got to be important, whatever it is. It's official because it was written on a typewriter. So that fascinated me. So here you get 3 things that I'm very interested in. I will tell you this, as much as I wanted to see the world, I had a mother that kept me in the house or tethered to the front stoop. And as far as playing with friends, I was usually inside crying as they were outside playing because my mother said it's time to come in. So I was actually in the complete opposite situation. Okay, but in spite of all these things that I loved, and I want you to be thinking, even as I'm speaking, what did you love? What were you fascinated by as a child? This is what I had as a goal. I saw a lot of older people that I observed being in the house, and I saw some people that were really happy and confident, and other people very cranky and not happy. We had lots of extended family people coming over. And this is something I noticed. The people who were cranky and unhappy were those who never got a chance to be themselves. And we all could recognize that there are many things in life that may waylay us or whatever. But the people that were happy and confident were those who were doing what they liked. Okay, next. Now, this was my so-called path to not success. I did mention to you that my grandfather was this attorney. He happened to pass away early, and all I ever heard growing up is, Maura is going to be a lawyer, like her grandfather. Well, great for my grandfather. He loved it. He knew he wanted to be a lawyer from the time he was a little boy. Good for you. But it was never on my radar. But doing what a good child would do, I did what I was told. I went to college. I majored in political science. And then I graduate college up in Boston, and now what is she going to do? She's going to become a lawyer. So I end up moving back to New Jersey, a place I really didn't want to live. I wanted to live in the warm weather, which should have been on the other slide. And I attend Seton Hall Law School in downtown Newark, New Jersey, which back in the early 80s was not a safe place. But on top of it, here I was in a situation, unlike today, because back then, if the few people that did go to law school would practice law, and if they didn't practice law, they were considered flunkies. I was not enamored with law. I could learn it, but anyway, what happened is that this is a picture of me after my 3rd semester. So I'm halfway through the program, and if you look at that person, that was me, outside of Mama Leone's. And I'm like, oh, and I could remember asking my guidance counselor at school, I said, tell me what it's like after I graduate. And he said to me, well, unless you're in the top 10% of your class, which I was not because I was applying myself, but not that much, he said, you'll probably earn $12,000 a year and you'll be doing research. I'm like, research? I don't like this now. You're going to tell me I have to do research in a quiet library with no people? And I said to him, I can't even pay my law school student loans back at that. So there I was. I am supposedly on the path to the path to success. But I was can you look? Not happy. Okay. And what did I need? I wanted something creative. I wanted something that I could get my passions involved in. I wanted to be around lots of people, and I wanted to be in Florida. And the big joke, it's a joke now, is that I thought to myself at this juncture, can I possibly stay in New Jersey for 40 years practicing in a career that really requires passion until I'm old enough to retire and say, oh, now I'm moving to Florida to do what I really want to do? And I didn't have it in me. So I get off on a path like, I was never prepared for anything else. What do I do? My family's probably thinking, you've made your flunky. You totally disappointed us all. But even though nobody mentioned the fact that I was the one paying the loans and having to do it. Okay, so next. So decades later, I will be very quick. I have had a long career, but wouldn't you know, I followed happiness. I've had a lengthy career behind it, but at midlife, I thought, what am I going to do now that my daughter's grown up that really has purpose for me, that allows me to develop my skills and have fun? And how do I make all these connections? And all I did, I started writing little stories about life that had me in bed laughing at night, and I thought I better go downstairs to the computer and write it. And then my husband, who realizes I like to talk and I'm always an advocate for others, said, Maura, I think what you need to do is stop talking to me. And he said, I'm going to put you on a camera, and we're going to load you up to YouTube. I'm going to call it Maura for You. He said, you are always for other people. He said, you are an advocate equally for all. And he said, we're going to call it Maura for You, so you could talk to your heart's content on these YouTube things. And he said, and by the way, a little more of Maura for You for everybody else out there means a little less of Maura for me. So that was good. But if you look, here I am decades later with really no formal background, no connections, no whatever. You can find me on Huffington Post, who actually wrote to me wanting someone who's writing about happiness. YouTube, over 200 videos. I'm on iTunes with 10-minute long podcasts that will ask a reflective question, tell you a little anecdotal story, and then at the end of it, we'll give you a call to action. Okay, now that you heard the question, you heard the story, what do you think about this? And by the way, see that woman over there? She's the other voice on the More For You podcast, Diane. I'm on Amazon with a series of books that, by the way, got their start here at St. Petersburg College. Even though I graduated BC, Boston College, my daughter attended St. Pete College and called me up one day and she said, Mom, they're teaching Intro to Dance here at St. Pete College. I said, oh, are you going to sign up? She said, well, why would I sign up? I've already had several years of dance. You're going to sign up. I wanted to dance when I was five. I am now 49 at this juncture. I'm like, dance? And she said, Mom, it's not going to be 5-year-olds in tutus. You can go, you could do this. Well, I want you all to know I failed classes twice here at St. Pete College, but fortunately the nice people kept pushing me on and encouraging me. It became the stepping out for me of my own comfort zone, because remember, I was supposed to be smart and in the box, but definitely not fun. And so learning how to dance was almost like I wanted to cry along the way, but I ended up having so much fun. I wrote a book called Exiting the Comfort Zone, Dance or Die. And there's several others. And ultimately, I did dance and not die. I'm on Match.com for happiness there, and I had a major interview on the BBC in England when I was out doing nothing more than what I loved. I was interviewing people and doing research on the backstory of the Beatles. How did they get there? How did they become these major iconic personalities that shifted music, culture, and everything else? And while I'm doing my own research, I ended up getting interviewed for almost a half hour. Pretty crazy. Okay, and if you look around, you could see I'm meeting with people, I'm having fun, and I'm happy. And I'm creating a career out of nothing except what I love. Okay, next. Now I know as I'm telling you these stories, you are listening and you're connecting it with what you like. You may not like people that much, but there's probably other things you do like. Now this is totally crazy. A couple of months ago, someone had me introduced to the executive director of the UNESCO Center for Peace. It's an offshoot of the UN. Here's the gentleman right here, Guy Jokin. He met with me and he said, Maura, would you be a speaker at the first annual Nelson Mandela Day? It's an annual day that was set up by the United Nations, so they celebrate it throughout the globe. And they flew me up there to be speaking at this event outside the nation's capital, and they announced me as the ambassador of happiness. And then several days later, the same organization, UNESCO Center of Peace, asked me to be a keynoter at their United Nations. It was a model UN event with students from 27 countries. And how was I introduced again? The ambassador of happiness. Now here's a connection for all of you to make about those little kids with their genius, and there's only a few silos to choose from. I wanted to be happy, travel the globe, and deliver good news. I said to the young students at the Model UN, I said, have you ever met or heard of the Ambassador of Happiness? And they're like, no, I don't, who is? I said, it's me. And I said, you want to know why you never met this person before? There was no such title out there. It didn't exist. But because I kept doing what I enjoyed, somebody somewhere decided, you're the Ambassador of Happiness. And then I got a phone call a few months ago from someone out west who has a big radio show, and he said, I've interviewed everybody, but I've never interviewed the Ambassador of Happiness. I want you on. And he said, if you haven't trademarked that, you better. Now, isn't that interesting? So think about all the applications in your life, even within your department, because that genius can show up anywhere, anytime, and in any way, in any fashion, but it literally is your genius. It's working from the inside. Okay, we already heard about my background, but my background included Boston College, leaving Seton Hall with a half of a law degree, which my mother, of course, would tell you, too bad she didn't become a lawyer. I was an executive recruiter, outplacement specialist. I managed several business offices in the telecom industry, and my husband and I had a company here, and I was a homeschooling mom. My daughter went to SBC, became friends with this girl. Okay, and here I am today. All right, next. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the models inside of our head, the models that society drives home, and then what kind of a new model can we have so that we are happier, freer, and we become the architects, let's say, of our own happiness and our own career path. But I'm telling you, you could be in your current career and find ways to be happier. All right, does this look familiar? This is you and I'm there, or maybe you're there talking down to me. Isn't that the way it always is? In order to get up, here's the first time we ever see this example. How many of you remember playing musical chairs at a birthday party? What happened every time the music stopped? A chair is gone. Does that not describe the world? Doesn't it describe this? You talk about conditioning. What are you doing? Wait, just coming back to me now. Think about the kids. What do? They push the other kid off the chair. They fight for the chairs. Now, we could laugh. But I want to tell you, change the environment. Put people in their 40s. Put them in a corporation. And they are still playing with the musical chairs mentality. And they will backbite. They'll push people away. They'll nose people out, right? They'll run all kinds of things because this is the model that's inside their head. There's only room for one at the top, and it better not be anybody other than me. Isn't that the way they think? Or if you happen to be on the other side, you could be one of the floor mat people, because we know the top people always like to look down at the floor mat people. And in my mind, as a child, because I told you everybody was my friend, I loved everybody, I never saw the world this way. So let's take a look at what I think the world should be. My paradigm, the happiness paradigm. I call it a new leadership paradigm for happiness and success. And I want you to notice happiness first, which is a gateway to success. The hub of the leadership or influence, because remember that was the first slide I showed you, influence? Okay. And you don't need a title to have this. Every single one of you is a person of influence, but most of you probably don't even realize it. You're oftentimes influenced by others, but you don't realize you have that same power and that aptitude and ability. Okay, see the hub of the wheel? This is you. These spokes on the outside, I want you to imagine every spoke has its own little circle, and at the edge of every spoke is everybody else within your circle. You can actually be a leader and an influencer within your circle. Do you notice it's all flat though? You can't figure out where's the top. But I want you also to look at something else. Let's take a person who is this part of it, right? They may be the outer spoke of someone else's hub of influence, but they are the center of their own wheel. And it may be at home, it may be through clubs, it may be through community organizations, it may be through career centers or positions. It doesn't matter. That's the way I see the world. And if you look at that, you can then see everyone with their internal genius, with those skills that they've got. Now, maybe everybody went to school together, but then after that, everybody's got their own little spice. So you might have, let's say, a basic understanding of basic things that everybody knows in the world. But then as you start to add to that the things that are of interest to you, then what you end up doing is you develop your talents and your skills and your expertise that looks really like no one else. Because frequently when you find out what you like and you put several things together, your collective ingredients make you unlike anyone else. So you don't need to be just like this person or just like that cookie cutter. You don't. In fact, what you'd realize is that your expertise ends up like no one else's, and therefore there is no competition for who and what you are. I happened to learn this when I was in the telecom industry. I was put into management in a position I didn't want and didn't think I was ready for. And oftentimes I felt like I had monumental things to do, which involved technical things and several others. And I thought, what am I going to do? I couldn't even not take the job. My manager said, either you take it or I'm firing you. So I thought, okay, this is nice. And then I remember thinking, I have no way to fail in this. I have a mortgage to pay. So what I learned is to find other people that were around me that had skills I didn't have. And I would say, oh my gosh, you know, you're great at the technical side. We're going to have a sales meeting. I'm going to talk about what some of our goals are. But you are so much better at technical stuff than I am. I'm going to give you some time, and will you please get up and share with everybody what you know? And this is how I managed. Several times we would have challenges come in, as all of you do. They would be from our corporate office, and they would say, okay, in the next the next 2 weeks, we want you to put this together and solve this issue and get this done. And I'd be like, well, I know some of it, but I really don't know how I'm going to resolve everything else. So I would invite people in to the community room, the office, the conference room, and I'd say, okay, this is what we're tasked to do. Now think about this. I have maybe a title of a manager, but I'm just right here. This is applicable for anybody. And I would say, all right, this is what the corporate office is asking. I have some ideas, but I don't have all the ideas. What do you guys think? And different people from the office would have different skill sets. So we would all listen to everyone else's idea. Now, what do you suppose an environment like that does? Everybody's important. Everybody's valued. They know their sense of value. And when they see that maybe I don't know everything, are they not free to offer their own ideas? I might have been the final word because obviously the buck had stopped with me and the responsibility level, but everybody got a chance to put in their 2 cents and then some. And there was no leveling in terms of who was better, who was worse. That is a completely different model. And I will tell you this, that interestingly enough, back 30 years ago, when I was doing this, or using this model, I worked in a national telecom firm, and we were probably one of the smaller markets. We were selling to the business community. So that meant New York City was competing with us, Chicago, Dallas, LA, all these cities. And would you believe, out of 34 cities, our city came out #1. We had the best sales, we had the best retention. I was like, how did this happen? I didn't even want the job, I didn't think I could do it. Our rates were typically higher than they should have been in our market, and we were supposed to be a low-cost telecom firm, but you know how it worked? It worked because we pursued happiness. Everybody felt important, everybody's talents were appreciated. I loved promoting people. And there was one woman who wrote to me on LinkedIn a couple of years ago, and she had worked for me a long, long time ago, and I hadn't seen her in several years, and she said to me, Maura, thanks for giving me permission to make mistakes. Now for me, I think that's perfectly normal, but I didn't realize it wasn't. Think about wherever you are. Do you give people permission to make mistakes? Do you give people to come up with a new idea? When you do that, you change the atmosphere of everything. And you become a person who influences what's going on rather than always being influenced by. You could literally overturn the way the world operates. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, this really should have been a picture of a guy thinking. I asked the question, what's your backdrop? And one of the outcomes of this class that we're giving here today is supposed to be to empower everyone who visits here to realize that you can have agency over your own life, your own career, your own happiness. In this case, what's your backdrop? I want you to imagine this. The backdrop would be the equivalent of someone who's maybe standing on stage, and behind him or her would be the curtains. Think of an old vaudeville theater or an old movie theater. The curtains, what is the backdrop of your life? Most of your backdrop is the subconscious part of your life that's so familiar to you, you're not even aware of it. And this I always loved. It's an old proverb, and it says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." Now, there are many ways to say the same thing, but you see where the word says thinketh? It doesn't mean as he thinks, like, gee, I think I want a Coca-Cola, or I think I want to go out to dinner tonight. Thinketh, that ETH at the end, is a verb that shows repetition, repetition, repetition. How many times do you suppose the backdrop of your life has been formed over and over and over again that gives you an idea in your subconscious of what the world is all about? And so therefore everything you do comes from what you've been thinking, whether or not you realize you're thinking of it. And let me give you what I have distilled the world to. Ready? By the way, could you give this girl a hand? I want you to know Kellyanne is probably going to end up being somebody very famous around here one day, but in the meantime, she's doing an awesome job. Thank you, Kellyanne. Okay, 2 worldviews. You could probably distill it down to this. The first is with a backdrop number 1. You are a victim of fear in a malevolent world. Everything is evil out there. I'm by myself. I'm all alone. And it's a dog-eat-dog world. And either I'm going to eat you, or I better eat you, because if I don't, you'll eat me. And by the way, in this kind of a world, it's victim-victor. But in that case, and I want you to think about this, watch when you watch the news, which isn't always good news. You will find that there's always a people that feel like they're the have-nots. And what do? They fight against the haves. You would think that the have-nots would rise up and be a new standard and say, you know what, this is the better way to do it. But instead, this is the way of the world. The have-nots become the new haves, and the other people, they have nothing. Where is that? What is that about? There is no happiness to that. And even though I opened this up with John Maxwell's quote, I want to give you mine. If the human race knew where it was going, wouldn't we have arrived by now? Now, I want you to think about it. The human race, you could think it's a species of people. But the human race, people are running and rushing and knocking people over and pushing people out of those little chairs and musical chairs. But no one really is moving forward. No one's advancing. We are not finding ourselves in a society that could be living in a much more sustainable, happy, productive way that really fosters creativity, new solutions, and really a better state of being. So this, I have to tell you, this is where many, many people live, because this is the way the world just continues to operate. And my goal today is to have you think a little bit differently. But in this case, do you see it fuels and circulates continual fear? You had just mentioned earlier, when I must have said, how do you think that makes you feel? And you said it makes everyone feel important when they're included. But if you're in a society like this, you think the world is out to get me. So therefore, you don't have that freedom of creativity. You're afraid. You stay in your comfort zone, and it really becomes a matter of survival. Let's see what the better one is. Backdrop number 2, please, Kellyanne, is worldview of being a beneficiary. What's a beneficiary? It comes from the word bene, meaning good. But in this case, we're fundamentally united. We don't see ourselves as separated. We see ourselves as working together. So that means whether it's in your relationship at home, with your family, with your neighbors, with your department, with the university, with your community, your country, could be with the people of the world. You see a sense of unitedness there. And this may seem like a strange way of explaining it, but let's assume we come in here today, and you could tell I'm not too shy, I'm fine speaking in front of people. Most people would say, oh boy, I don't want to speak in front of a group, but obviously I'm at home. But you could put me in other situations where I am totally clueless. And yet, there could be someone else out there who has skills that I need, that would so help me that maybe I couldn't get where I want to go without someone else's skills. And yet that person would never want to be maybe a speaker because it wouldn't make them happy. But they are so organized, or they're facilitators, or they're creatives. There's something else that they do that I would need in order to get where I'm going, and then I, in turn, would be able to use some of my skills to help others. That's what I mean when I said we are fundamentally united. We don't see people as a threat. We see people as a gift. We see people as, wow, you've got some awesome talents. And this is truly how I think. I could look at people, interview people, they could be 8 years old or 80, and I could very quickly attune to whatever their areas of interest, expertise, or excellence is. That's the way my mind works. But when your mind works that way, then you change everywhere you go. And you somehow give permission to other people to be themselves, to be free, and to strike out and say, I have an idea. You know how many ideas are probably sitting on the table nobody's ever heard of? Very interesting, because people are afraid. Not when you live in the benevolent world. Backdrop. Okay, next. All right. Now, how many times have you watched TV or done anything and said, or read the paper and said, oh, get that person out of there, or that leader is doing a terrible job, and all we do is criticize. What we forget, though, is that we have the ability to be the change that we want to see in the world. It's very easy to find things we get frustrated about, and plus it doesn't make us very happy. But imagine if you look at your life in a different fashion and say, wherever I am today, it could be at the grocery store, it could be with your kids who are playing sports, and maybe you have an opportunity to choose the first world. Okay, I don't like what's going on here. I want to attack so-and-so's other parent who's not giving my son or daughter a chance to play. It could be anything. Or I could sit and say, this is a really unique experience I've got here, or an opportunity in front of me. How can I take a few minutes and use this for good? How can I change someone's behavior, speak to them with respect, but get them to see their own value and yet hold on to my own value as well? That is the change that you wish to see in the world, but you become the doer of it rather than waiting for the world to do it. Do you know sometimes even if you just change your mindset by 10%, it makes a big difference? And I said, use your mind to inspire and empower yourself, and use your mind to change the world around you. All right. This is a Buddha remark that happiness comes when your work and your words are of benefit to yourself and others. This goes hand in hand with that same idea of the benevolent backdrop, because benevolence comes when everyone is in it. Everyone could benefit. There's room for everyone. In fact, not only is there room, there is welcome for everyone, because the more you get to shine, the more you feel better about yourself, the less angry you'll be, the less insecure. There's so many benefits, and then you, without saying a word, give permission to other people. Go ahead and you be yourself too. Okay, I like that Buddha thought. Okay. So you're just going to say, well, Maura, you look like you're pretty happy, but what about me? Where do I start? This is where we go right back to where I began. What were you daydreaming about or doing as a child? Now, it could have been before you went to school, but it doesn't matter. Maybe you were in high school. But think about those times in your life before the world told you everything that you had to be, or before everything got solidified, that this is who I have to be. This is the cookie cutter I need to fall into. These are all of the markers I need to follow in order to be successful in life. So what I'd like for you to do right now, close your eyes, and I want you to put your hand over your chest as if you're going to say like the, the Pledge of Allegiance, right there. And the reason why you're going to do that is because it's going to take your attention away from your intellect and bring you back to your own GPS system, okay? Now here's what I want you to do. Go back in time, survey your early years, and think about things you used to do, things you used to entertain yourself with. Maybe it was movies you would watch, or books you would read, or toys you'd play with. It doesn't matter. But the moment a smile comes on your face, I want you to hold on to it, okay? Okay, now I want some of you, it's so interesting watching faces because you could immediately see people checking in like, I remember that was really fun or whatever. Or I forgot about that. Now, for those of you who were surveying and didn't come across anything that yet put the smile on your face, here's what I want you to do. Remember what we just said. And when you're on your own, do it again. And even if you don't see anything, don't worry about it. You will get your answer. You could be out gardening in the car, and all of a sudden it'll be like some old message or old thing. Could have been a song you liked that meant so much to you. Whatever it is, it'll come back to you. Whenever you smile, see the inside, living happy from the inside, I want you to remember that and call it your string, your ribbon, your whatever. Be led by your inner smile. Therein lies a secret to your own future success. Okay, now, what do you do after you find that string? You find that happy place. Oftentimes, the happy place you looked at as a child or as a young person, you'll say, well, what does that have to do with today? And you might think, nothing, but don't think it does. I met with someone a couple of months ago who was from Croatia, and she had a government position. And I was talking about something similar, and she said, oh, Maura, I can't wait to get this answer. What is it? She said, I'm going to go home today and think tonight, because I must have been at a session for more than once. And I said, well, whenever it is, I want to hear it. So she said to me the next day, Maura, all I could remember was that I used to like making dolls, like paper dolls. And she said, then I would rearrange them. Who was going where? Who was being here? Who was being there? I said, I know exactly what that is. I said, you have a mind of organization of people. And she said to me, oh my gosh, you're right. She said, do you want to know? Now she's, again, the government position. She said, I lie in bed sometimes and I think about all these people and all their resources and how I could put them together. She said, because I have some ideas of things I want to do. And I said, look at that. Her mind, even as a child, was developing images of people, and she was grouping them together to solve a problem, to create something new. And here she was in her mid-40s holding a high-level government position. But that was, and she was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You see the connections? I wanted to be happy. I actually did, this is funny, even when I went to college, if I could have been anything, I would have wanted to be a goodwill ambassador to South America, because Spanish was my second language. And I'm a happiness ambassador. What is that? And I don't have to answer to anybody but my own happiness. I don't have to represent a government, right? It's amazing. So that's why be open and be creative. But here's what you could do. Once you tune into your little happy smile spot from your earlier years, write it down. Draw a picture if you happen to be that kind of a person. Record something in audio form if you want to remember it that way. Or even capture a photo. You know, people do vision boards, whatever works for you. But make sure it's something you can, that will capture what you remembered, and you could constantly return to it as you please, okay? And connect it with a feeling of something. Next, then start connecting to that happiness for just 10 minutes a day. Some of you may be parents with little kids and you have like no time. But you could find 10 minutes a day. Maybe it means you're listening to something in the car. Maybe it means before you, or as you're having lunch, you do a little research. And what you want to do is just start somewhere. Don't think about, I haven't done it. Think about, how can I take these little baby steps and pursue what I like? Then go on exploring, little by little. Read some. Learn a little bit about what it was you think you're interested in, and keep going. Make believe you're going on a treasure hunt. And always go with your insides. How do I feel? Is this exciting me? Is this interesting to me? And if it's not, get off that track and look for something maybe that's similar but not exact, okay? Connect with people. Engage with it. Maybe it's a new skill you want. Go and try it out, okay? Step out. You notice each one of these things are like, it's almost like coming out of your own little closet. Okay, I could do this, then I could do this, and I could do this. If you look at the next one, meet together with people, groups, societies, etc., that are in that realm that fosters your own internal happiness. And what that does for you is that ultimately you're going to be around people that speak a certain way, do certain things that you're interested in already. Eventually, remember we talked about the backdrop of the mind, the way you continuously think? You will start to think of yourself in new ways. And suddenly all new perspectives will open, but you'll actually feel more like that person rather than just saying, oh, I wish I had have done that, or I wish I tried that. But you make yourself find yourself in those situations. Work your happiness into your now circumstances. How many of you are sitting there thinking, well, sounds really good, but I can't stand what I'm doing, or I don't like my manager, or oh, I've got this person sitting next to me who's such a downer, whatever. Work your happiness into your now circumstances when I was in the telecom industry, it was the only position 30 years ago that I was offered down here. There weren't many jobs. And I'm thinking, I'm really not a technology-driven person. I use it all the time to further what I want to do, but it's really, I'm not a technical person. I'm a people person. So here I was in the technical industry, and I'm not even a negative competitor when it comes to selling. So that wouldn't have been my career, but that's what I'm doing. I'm managing salespeople in the technical industry. What I realized in that industry is that it gave me an opportunity to identify new talent, to interview people, to train people, and I love that. To identify people's talents and promote them. And then I became a promoter of managers, a manager of managers, a promoter of managers, a mentor of managers, and when I call them managers, let me change it, leaders, because of the way in which I would think. I loved it. My company, in fact, I didn't even want, there were several promotions I was offered, and I thought, I want to live in Florida, I don't want to travel, and I didn't want to do that back then. The company was sending managers to me that I could mentor here in Florida, in the nice Sunshine State. The managers benefited, the corporation benefited, I got to use my skills. So do you see that I was maybe not in the optimum environment, but I worked it into my now circumstances. And much of what I acquired back then has helped me today. So could you see some of those connections on many levels in your own life where you could make those connections? Say yes. Some of you are like, I don't think somewhere. Okay, next. So pull and develop your string once you find out what that was that made you happy. Okay, I got this, be the change you wish to see in the world. We all want the world to change, but few of us realize we can be that change. Do you ever hear about kings abdicating their thrones? You know, these are people, maybe they came to the throne, but then they stepped down and they really didn't occupy their role. They take off the crown, whatever. I want you to know, the world doesn't tell you this, but you are your own royalty. You are your own king, your sovereign, your queen, whatever it may be. Every single one of us is that. But the world doesn't tell us that. This is part of the paradigm of the happiness, benevolent paradigm. And it's so important. When you realize that there is room for you in this world, and not just room, but there is welcome for you in this world, there's not another you. There's not another person that came into this world with your background, with your challenges, which, by the way, can sometimes be the biggest catalysts to your growth and your greatness. There's no one else like you, but when you sit and say, you know what, I like who I am, I like the things that I'm interested in, I'm going to pursue them, I'm going to work out that happiness from the inside out, and wherever I am going to be the person of influence in this situation, rather than just being beaten down or kind of going like a ball because everybody keeps pushing me. And that's how most people live. They feel like victims. Wherever you are, and especially in challenging places, take a few minutes and say, you know what? This is a great opportunity for me. How can I use this in a way that's of benefit to all? And oftentimes when you get on your own and you believe in a benevolent world and you really expect your soul's going to talk to you, you'd be surprised the novel answers or the innovative ways of doing things that come back. I see people are out there, but okay, we still have like 5 more minutes. Okay. So you be that change you want to see instead of complaining about all those rotten people out there. Okay, I wanted to give this is a quickie thing because I wanted this to be a leadership position. And again, when I say kings have abdicated, why not sit down and occupy your place of authority, and it belongs to you. And the thing is, if you don't take it, nobody could ever give it to you. You alone have to take that place. Okay, so what are you going to do as a leader? And a leader, remember, you don't need a title to lead. I gave the LEAD, thinking it would be easy. Ready? The first, look backwards. Now, what does that mean? It means whatever you're going to do today, think about what this is going to look like tomorrow, next month, next year. The simplest example of this I had was Bill Clinton. If you were to think of President Bill Clinton's legacy, what immediately comes to mind? See? See? Bill Clinton was not thinking about tomorrow. He was thinking about the cute girl in his office, right? So he has a title, but he's not thinking this is going to backfire, right? Am I right? Okay, enough said. Think about the consequences, but write yourself into your future. And I will tell you this, when you do take a little extra time and think about your tomorrow and your next year, you'll find out that you'll make far fewer bad decisions. I had a funny word to use, but I won't use it. Okay, You just won't make bad decisions. Okay. All right, what about E, the E in lead? Everyone, people are watching and listening. You're that person of influence, so consider your words. Are your words really abusive? Are they kind? Do they give people permission, or are they cutting people down? Consider your behavior. Sometimes people use the right words and they have terrible behavior, or they have good behavior and they have rotten words. How about this one? Think before responding. How frequently do people, especially people that are in a situation where they're so stressed, somebody yells at them and then they want to yell back to defend themselves because it's just reaction, reaction, reaction. In order to change the world, take a few minutes, step back and say, all right, how can I handle this and how can I change the atmosphere? How can I think in such a way this will be good for everyone? You can always explain yourself, but you don't have to attack. All right, and what are your motives and your spirit? How many people could be dressed perfectly, they have the right position, they say all the right things, but you're with them and you think, oh my gosh, I wouldn't trust this person if as far as I could throw them. Am I right? Or you have somebody that everybody pretends is so great and it's the elephant in the room. You're like, this person is just a liar and a thief. Why do we keep acting like they're great? But if you really want to be a leader, be that person so that your words and your work become one and the same. Okay? You can't believe how infectious that is and how much it does to improve your life, your happiness, and the world. Okay, and I think there's an A and a D. Okay, the A, advance. If I had more time, I'd have you laughing more, but I have to close up. Okay, the A in lead is to advance. What do leaders do? They advance a cause, a culture, or a vision. This goes right back to what's important to you. In my case, it was happiness. I really believed in a better world, and as you could see, I'm actually advancing the cause for happiness in the world. And it's not just about your work. Ask yourself, why do I do what I do? Get to your why. Everything I did because I wanted to see people do well. I wanted to be around other people. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be a good news ambassador. That was my why. And I'll tell you, if you know your why, it will cause you and give you everything you need to get through the hard times. People will do things because of a what. I want more money. I want this. I want that. But when you realize that you know your why, which is really your inner happiness, it's the very extra force you need to go further and farther when most other people will give up because you have a why for what you do. Okay, and the D, destiny. That leaders really are people of destiny, but they pave the way for a future greater good. If you notice, real destiny, it's not just for you, it's for others. If you ever look at people that have made a difference, they've done things that didn't just benefit them because they're growing themselves up or they're overcoming maybe some problem they had in their own life or an issue. But what they do is they pave a path so that others in their wake can enjoy a greater benefit. Hence, the beneficial world. And embrace the journey, because not everything on your way to happiness is happy. But know that your good as well as your not so good always work well together, and be legacy minded. Think about tomorrow. So I hope all of you are leaving here where your barometer on happiness went a little higher, that you feel a little more empowered, and I invite you all, if you're interested further, visit me, write to me, maura@mauraforyou.com, because I'm always for you, and I would love to have you connect. So I guess thank you, right? And thank you to Diane and Kelly. And thank you all for coming.